admitting when we're wrong is very important. It's very important to be able to see that you've made a mistake and that something needs to be corrected. And I have found that I have been ranking comics not as accurately as I should be. In fact, it is very off. And I thought about the reason whenever the ISOM 3 video got comments about the ratings being too high for ISOM. I think I gave it a 6. I think I gave it a 6 out of 10 or something. And people were saying that that was too much for it. That I was being too lenient for it. In my mind, I'm not being too lenient on it. I'm being, in my opinion, I'm being fair. But I thought about it. How I rate things is very different than how they should be rated, or at least how I am trying to rate them. And the main reason for that, I think, is the school system that I was brought into. We did not have the 10 grade point system, okay? We did not have that. I graduated on the old way, which makes me smarter than you. Anyway, if you did go on the 10-point grade system. If you didn't, high five. We're the smart ones in the room. Anyway, all jokes aside, the grading system was like 93 to 100 was an A, 92, 93 to, it could have been 92 or 93, to 85 was a B, 84 to 78 was a C, and then 77 to 70 was a D, and then 69 and below was an F. Haha, funny number. The idea that put in my head, to me, was that a mid is a 7 because a C is in the late 70s, early 80s. So to me, it's like, okay, if something is mid, then it must be 7. But that's not true at all. A 7 is a good, 7 out of 10 is a good movie, right? It's a good movie, it's a good series, a good comic, whatever. But that sounds like it's worth a watch. But a mid movie would be a 5 out of 10. Like a perfectly mid movie would be a 5 out of 10. And I realized that I've been doing these things wrong because of my bias of growing up in the education system that I grew up in. So, I'm going to go through all the comics that I've reviewed and even some that I haven't reviewed in their own videos and go through each of them, all while this corner of the screen here is subliminally telling you to go read Little Miss Steele. I don't know how Global Comics keeps track of the views because this was at 2,000 3 days ago and now it's at 2,200. So unless I got 200 views in like 3 days, which would be awesome, I think it updates it in bursts, like once a month it'll update the view count on something. That's my thoughts, because this was stuck at 2,000 for a while, and then like all of a sudden it just shot up to 2.2. No 2.1 or anything like that, just 2 to 2.2. And then you can see that the viewer retention is pretty good, because this at 2.2 thousand, 1.8 thousand, and 1.6 thousand, this was fairly recent in comparison to these two. The viewer retention is actually really good, and I'm very happy about that. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Part 4 is coming in August. I'm very excited to show you what I've got with that. It's going to be a really, really action-packed episode. I know I say that about every one of them, but this one is really going to be a plot-heavy episode as well. So stay tuned to that if you're looking forward to that. I know these two were sort of a little more, still part of the main story, but a little more of a detour, a little more of a fun little side quest. Volume 4 is going to be very plot focused, so look forward to that. But I'm going to go ahead and start. My music has stopped. Let me make sure that is still playing. I don't know why it's not playing. Is my autoplay turned off? It's on a playlist. I don't know why I didn't do that. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. ISOM 1. Now, very recently, part of what made me want to record this video is because I've been thinking about doing it for a while. But I've also, I just finished watching Vonster's review of ISOM 1. And it reminded me of things that I had forgotten, because it's been like 3 years since ISOM 1 came out at this point. And it reminded me of some things that I had forgotten about this book, compared to, some more books that I've read recently. And looking back on this book especially, the art style is very unappealing to me. Now, art is subjective, very subjective. There's some things that we can measure more objectively, but art style is always going to be a preference. But this one is like, I don't know, it's just so bland, and the way that some of the faces, like that are, you know, farther away, they just lose all sense of detail sometimes, which is totally normal, but to me it just looks, I don't know, it's just not really my cup of tea. If I'm gonna draw, like, you know, because I'll do that sometimes, where, you know, obviously the facial features will get less detailed the farther away the character is, but it's like, it to me, it doesn't look as good if you're going for a more realistic style like this. It doesn't look as good in that compared to like a cartoony style or something where you can make the dot eyes be funny, right? The dot eyes can be funny looking. Just as Adventure Time. Adventure Time made bank with that art style. But the premise of this book as well, I had sort of forgotten that this book really didn't have a great setup for like Isam's motivation, other than, like, you know, he's looking for a girl who's a friend of his sister's. Like, he's not personally involved in this until, you know, he fights Darren Fontano, and then it becomes more about pride, right? Then it becomes an ego match between these two, and I like that setup. But maybe if instead of being just almost a random girl that Isam doesn't know, instead of being that, maybe it could have been his sister, right? Maybe it could have been Altona that was being held hostage or being forced to work for Darren Fontano. You know, something like that could have been so much more effective at making us immediately identify with Isam a little bit more. They also, I had forgotten about, I didn't even like know about this, but this scene here where he punches the guy's guts and like his intestines are flying out of him and all that kind of stuff. YouTube should not ding that because it's too far away from the camera. You can't really see it. But man, I mean, I've forgotten about that. And they in the new versions that of this book that have released for like the 3-year anniversary, they have removed that. They removed the blood and the guts and stuff. And I'm left here wondering if I can find the page real quick of Eric. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Man, I can't find it. But there's a page of Eric himself, like the cartoonized version of Eric July, that's here saying like respect the source material or something like that. But it's, you know, my thinking is, it's hard to say respect the source material when your own book, you're going back and retconning stuff, like the fact that Isam punched the guts out of a man. You know what I mean? It's hard to take that seriously. Whenever you're actively like undoing your own storytelling. And the reason why they would do that is because like it's too graphic for a superhero to do, right? If you're gonna make a character that we want to root for, you got to make him appealing in some way. And him punching the guts out of a man, to me, is not appealing. So, you know, I'm not. It's something that I think they definitely should not have done. They should have just committed to it and said, okay, Isam is not the best person. Maybe we can make him turn around and be a better person. And that's something that I've heard. That's something that I've heard a lot of people criticize, is that there's you know, the superhero characters supposedly in the Rippaverse are not heroes, or not good people at all. And my response is like, were they ever trying to say that they were perfectly, you know, moral people, like from the beginning? Like, I never got the impression that the Rippaverse was trying to make a Superman type of character that's the paragon of morality. So that criticism has never like really bothered me that much. Like, I'm fine with the heroes being more Punisher-like than anything, but if someone's gonna do things like the Punisher, like Isam does in this book, we should have a good reason. We should have like a reason why he's so brutal. The Horseman kind of explains that in that comic, but it doesn't really in ISOM, it's not really explained all that well, and just a few things like that kind of reminded me of how mediocre ISOM was. And then ISOM 2 drops, and it's even more. It's got even more problems than the first one. The first one's biggest issue, in my opinion, was the focus. There was a very huge lack of focus because of all the different characters being introduced for the sake of spinning off their own series in the future. And it worked. I mean, they got their own series and books and stuff like that, but at what cost? You know, the narrative structure of the comic. And this does the exact same thing, but even worse. So it's, to me, ISOM 1 and 2 both have the same problems. ISOM 3 kind of reels it back in. They correct some things. And I praise the character arc that ISOM goes on, and I do think that's a cool little character arc. But going from reading this and then going back to ISOM 1 and seeing how he acts and what he does in this comic, I'm just not buying it. I'm just not buying the character growth now in reflection of the entire trilogy here. I'm not buying the character growth, to be honest. My ISOM 3 video is now basically out of relevance because my opinion has basically changed on all three of these because I've gone back and looked through them and seen in retrospect. I gotta give this now, reviewing it in the proper, scale from 1 to 10, I gotta give it a 4. Like, all three of these is a 4. I'm not even gonna bother doing them individually, because I think they're all basically the same. Now, the art does improve. ISOM 3, the art does improve. There are some errors that I mentioned, but the art does improve throughout it, but it's still just the style is not my favorite thing ever. But overall, the package that this delivers is just not that great. And for Eric being a first-time writer, I can forgive the writing not being as good. That's if that's the biggest sin of this, that the writing isn't as good as it could be, then I totally understand it being a beginner writer. I'm not gonna complain too much about that, right? But there's plenty of other things to complain about in these books, which is why I feel like the rating has to be a 4 out of 10. It's just it's just got a lot of problems, and maybe one day I'll go through and take the position of like an editor and say, okay, here's how I would fix your story, type of thing. Another criticism I get from the Riververse stuff that I hear is the 3D assets. I don't mind 3D assets. It doesn't bother me at all as long as it doesn't look too out of place. And there are a few examples in these books, or all these books in general, that the 3D assets do look out of place. But for the most part, they didn't stand out to me. It didn't bother me at all. I'm all for if you can make the backgrounds easier, if you can make that process easier to save more time to draw the characters in more cool dynamic poses. I'm in favor of using 3D assets if it means you can get to the main important part, which is the characters, how they're drawn, the effects and everything. That's the far more important stuff. So I'm totally fine if they use 3D assets. It doesn't bother me at all. Some people, that's a deal breaker. That's another thing that I think is a little subjective. Is some people it's a big deal. Some people it's not. So, just depends on you as a person, right? So I'm gonna try and balance all these things. I'm gonna try and keep all this stuff. I should have prepared a space for all this stuff, but I'm also trying to do this in order as well from where I what I reviewed them in. Let's check out freaking Alpha Core, which was next. Alpha Core, pretty good book. But is it a 9 out of 10? No, I think it's more like a 7 out of 10. It's good, but it still has a few. It still just has a few glaring issues. One, the character arc that the cop goes on, that he's got the technopath abilities, is a great arc. I like the arc for him. It's a satisfying ending for his character, but he's not a main character. This isn't the Super Cop comic. It's the Alpha Core comic, which they are super cops. But the problem is that none of the main characters go through any kind of meaningful development. There's just I think a lack of things that the main characters get to grow. You know, a lack of main character development, and that's the whole point of this book, was to develop the idea of, okay, who are these super cops? What are they doing? Are they actually good people, or are they just kind of government scum? And I don't get the idea that they're government scum. I don't get the idea that they're a fascist regime or anything of super cops. My idea is that they are good-hearted people, but the disasters that happen in this comic make them look horrendously incompetent, especially Solari, which it is funny. It is funny what happens, especially the facial expression whenever he plugs into flash drive and it causes the air fortress to drop. My biggest thing is, like, you know, could you do a joke like that without causing the death and destruction of the city? Yes, you could. You didn't need to make them look stupid to make the joke. And you know, Solari himself is not that interesting of a character. He's kind of a bland, just super strong, flying, super indestructible type of character. Braxwell, I think is his name, is just basically the same. Other than he's quiet and he uses weapons on top of having super strength and flight. And then the other girl, which I can't, the girl which I cannot ever remember the name of. I'm sorry. She's the only one that's fairly interesting with the energy whips and stuff. But you know, at the same time, again, she doesn't really go on the character development train. It's mainly the cop that's paired with her in this issue. And my question is, where's more Alpha Core? Why isn't there more Alpha Core yet? It's only been one of Alpha Core and 3 of Yaira, and I just feel like the distribution is not being very fairly laid out for the characters of the Rippaverse. But anyway, moving on. Speaking of the devil herself, Yaira. This is probably the most horrendous comic I've reviewed, and one of the worst I've read. It's genuinely that bad. It's genuinely that bad. And the more I think about it, the more I revisit it and try and like see if there's any kind of redeeming qualities. I find none. It's just not a good comic. It's just the main character sucks. The plot sucks. The pacing sucks. The art is okay. Again, the art style doesn't do it for me, but it's, you know, it's fine art. It's just it's nothing like, you know, that appeals to me. And the idea of this character, the idea of the Rippaverse kind of initially taking on the idea that this is like counterculture. This is, you know, not necessarily saying it's an anti-woke comic company, but it's like, you know, we're not going to make the same mistakes that the mainstream does, right? That was one of their points that Eric pushed. And then this is Mary Sue the book. She can do anything and everything, and suffers no consequences for any actions. And it's just, to me, it's just this is just a Mary Sue power fantasy comic, and it's not at all what I wanted. It's very bad. It's very bad. I would give, you know, if I gave ISOM a 4 out of 10, I would give this a 2, man. The only redeemable parts of it is Stefania. Stefania's character, I think, is interesting. That's her descendant, who awakens her Yaira powers. But yeah, it's just a messy comic. It's too much just going on. Too many characters to balance, and it was not a very good comic at all. Gooding, on the other hand, was a little bit better. Again, pacing is the issue. They tried to cram too much of Gooding's life story into this smaller comic than the others. And I hate that, because at its core, I think Gooding is actually a good story. I think it does have some great moments, but it's held back by the pacing issues. And Gooding himself as a character was introduced in ISOM 2 as this kind of hero for hire. Like he would protect your place, your place of business, or even just like your town from disasters, and and stuff like that. Like he was a hero for hire, and that concept, and while it might not make people like him initially, it might not make him very likable. What it does do is set up his character growth. This is his starting point where he's doing hero work for hire, and he can begin to slowly over time develop into a more selfless character. And this book just speedruns that. And if Mike Baron was given a whole series to write this character out, and the antagonist, which kind of mirrored him in A Dark Reflection, I really thought that was well done. If Mike Baron was given a whole series instead of just one comic, I think he could have actually written a great story. But because he was forced to rush this, I feel like it just came out just, you know, not as good as it could have been. Butterbean made a cameo. Hello, Butterbean. Hello. But yeah, I mean, I just really hate that this comic turned out the way it did, because it is at its core a good story, a good-ing story. But yeah, I gotta give this, you know, unfortunately, I gotta give this I think I can't give it more than a 5 out of 10. Again, the core of it, good bones to the story. It's just too fast-paced, too stuffed. But let's take a look at Horseman. Now, Horseman, the next comic in the Rippaverse. I'm just going ahead and knocking out all the Rippaverse stuff. The Horseman is actually also pretty good. Also written by Chuck Dixon. It's got some art errors, but I'm not talking about that today. It's mainly it's a good story. It's Horseman is a character that is brutal, like Isom is in Isom 1. But it actually gives a reason for it. Like his brother-in-law was taken by you know, gang violence, and now he takes out gangs and steals their money to provide for his widowed sister and his nephew. And it made him a lot more, not necessarily relatable, but understandable than a lot of other characters in the Rippaverse. And immediately that to me was like, okay, that's good. A character that I can sympathize with, a character I can sort of latch onto and understand. And you know, the only thing I would say that kind of holds this back, writing wise, is that the villains are just sort of generic. There's not really anything interesting to them. They're like, oh wow, they're Nazis and they look like they're from a punk gladiator weird crossover era, and they just don't interest me. Like, there's nothing really to them, in my opinion, that makes them interesting. I mean, they're for hire. They're you know, mercenaries for hire, and you can see some parallels, some comparisons to Horseman as a character. But Horseman is never for hire. He's doing it for his family, and that's it. And I just felt like if they wanted to make, you know, this was initially going to be like a one-off series, and then they've confirmed it's going to be its own series now going forward, because I guess the animated series fell through. But the concept of this character is good, but the actual conflict in the book could have been better. It could have been more personal instead of just being a generic bad guy type of situation. I would have preferred, I would have really preferred a more personal villain for him. But besides that, it's a fine comic. It's got some actually good art other than the errors. Probably one of the better visual comics from the Rippaverse, despite its problems. But it's, and even the design, people hate on the design. I don't think the design is that bad. Hot take. I don't think the Horseman's design is bad. I think it stands out from other people, like, you know, Batman or Punisher. It makes him, he looks like very different than them in the mask and the bumps on the armor and stuff as well. Like, it's a distinct look, and I think it works for the character. But if I'm gonna grade this, 7 out of 10. I'll give it the same as Alpha Core. I think it was enjoyable. It was a good it was a step in the right direction, but I haven't seen anything like it since. So with that being said, that's all the Riververse stuff. Let's go back to some non-Riververse stuff. Terror in the Trenches. Oh boy, this is easily 9 out of 10. I don't even need to really talk about it because it's just good. It's just good. It's well written. It came with a lot of extra stuff too, like this poster that I still need to hang up. It's a well written, well drawn comic, and you know it might take longer for each volume to come out, but it is worth the wait to a certain extent to get more quality stuff like this, because in a perfect world, Rise Again Comics would have like a full staff of people that are working on this, that are pumping out one every year. But you know, like the Riververse does, like they do multiple comics every year, and you know, quantity, that's great, but where's the quality at? And I feel like that's the biggest complaint about the Riververse, is that they go for quantity over quality. But whereas Rise Again is doing like a slower pace at producing them, but the art that comes from it is stylized. It's well detailed. It looks really good. It's the kind of stuff that I frankly wish I could do. I'm still trying to improve as an artist. I'm still trying to improve as a writer. I really enjoy both of the processes, but I just simply don't have the time to put out stuff that high quality, and I don't want to release things at that slow of a pace. I want to release multiple comics per year, like I've been doing with these in the past with these past 3 volumes. I'm trying to do a faster pace because I don't want to be drawing Little Miss Steel when I'm 40 years old. I want Little Miss Steel to be finished ideally when I'm in my mid 30s. And I would love to get it out faster than that. But I'm 28 now. But it's one of those things where there has to be a certain balance, I think, of quality and quantity. And if I could do the quality of Terror in the Trenches at the pacing that I'm doing now, I would do it. But it's just not possible with just me doing it. I would love to get some help that is just doing it for the love of the game, because I'm not making much money off of this. I am selling physical copies, but it's not to a large enough extent that I could pay someone in advance to do the art. They would have to be in it for the love of the game. So but yeah, and then I don't think I have to adjust this. I made this Common America, I made this review with the mindset of I need to do the scale correctly instead of doing it how I was, so I don't need to make a correction on that. Other comics, I did Kolga. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10, I would say. Distinct art style. It had some inconsistencies, but not too much to make me really be bothered by it. It's just something I noticed. And that fixed itself by the end of the comic. It seemed like as the comic was being produced, they really picked up steam and in the art style and making it more consistent. But the story I thought was really unique, in the setting, the world building and stuff was really well done. I really enjoyed Kolga. It was a great one. I heard the second one's coming out really soon, so I'm looking forward to that. The other thing with it was just the length of it. It was a good length. It had plenty of stuff to go through and really absorb. And it was a good time. It was a good read. I don't have it physically. I read it digitally, but it was really good. I would give it an 8 out of 10. And then the other one that I didn't do, the other comic that I didn't review physically was Screecher. And Screecher was good, but I felt like it was just a tad generic. Nothing like, nothing bad. Nothing bad at all. Like, everything I thought in it was pretty good. It just didn't stand out as much to me. The art style I thought was good, but it also didn't really catch my eye as much as something like Terror in the Trenches did. So I would still give that a 7 out of 10. I would still give that a 7 out of 10. It was still an enjoyable experience reading it. So I need to read the other volumes because there's more out. I need to get to that and do some more. But with all that being said, I hope you've understood why the ratings of my reviews have not been as accurate as they could be. I hope you understand that. Apologies for the inaccuracy. From now on, like I said with the Common America stuff, my rating system is going to be better. It's going to be more in mind with 5 as a mid. So if I think something is mid, it's going to get a 5. Higher mid is going to get a 6. Lower mid, like I saw him, is going to get a 4. But that's basically just what I wanted to do with this video. Just kind of clear up the misconception and explain why I've given things the ratings I have. But now I've got that worked out. Now we got it. We're locked in. We're locked in. But yeah, thanks for all the views on Little Miss Steel. Thanks for the people who have bought it physically. If you're somehow watching this video, I don't really advertise the YouTube channel to people I sell the comic to. If you're somehow watching this video, thank you so much for buying it physically and telling me about how much your kids are enjoying it or how much you are enjoying it. I really appreciate that. It keeps me motivated, especially when the kids come to the table and tell me how cool it is and how they want to do their own art stuff in the future. And it just warms my soul so much. But with all that being said, thanks so much for watching. Till next time, peace out.